I'm all in on Jewish peoplehood. I just am. I've been thinking about this a lot in our year of I'm a humanist, but I'm also a tribalist, a family man. I feel deeply connected to Jews around the world and those who love them. I sometimes tear up when we sing Achenu, and I allow myself for a moment to contemplate the unfathomable situation of our hostages. For me, they're definitely our hostages. I don't know any of them personally, but they're mine. And this way of thinking about Jews as a family, a people, it's ancient. Before we were a dot, a religion, if we are that, I'm not sure, we were an a people. I'm grateful we were able to bring Noam Pianko, our scholar in residence this past fall. His scholarship helped me understand the evolution of our Jewish sense of collectivity and what the word has meant in different places and historical contexts. But the fact of the matter is that thousands of years ago, there were two main centers of Jewish life: Jewish learning, Jewish culture, religious practice, Babylonia and Eretz Israel. And the two interacted with each other. They depended on each other. They had a shared sense of destiny. Today, there are also two centers of Jewish thriving, America and Medinat Israel. It depends how you count it, but of the nearly 15 million or so Jews in the world, somewhere around 7 million live here, and somewhere around 7 million live there. The United States and Israel are twin suns in a binary solar system. We orbit one another, and right now that gravitational pull is as strong and as turbulent as ever. This week I had the opportunity to travel to another Jewish promised land, Miami. I was there with a group of more than 100 rabbis to talk about our own and our community's relationship with Israel. The gathering was shrouded in anxiety about what it means to be Jewish in this country, in this moment. We were instructed to keep our location off social media until the conference concluded. We were proud Jews, prominent Jewish leaders, but in hiding, in Aventura. There were beefy guys guarding us from, homicidal golfers? But there was also a palpable sense of fear. You may have seen a sobering piece by Franklin Foer in The Atlantic this week. It's titled, "The Golden Age of American Jews is Ending." Anti-Semitism on the right and the left threatens to bring to a close an unprecedented period of safety and prosperity for Jewish Americans and demolish the liberal order they helped establish. I don't know yet if Foer's fatalistic prediction will come to pass, but I am a bit worried, and I don't worry easily. And yet, there are many reasons to believe that American Jewry is here to stay and will continue to thrive for the foreseeable future. So today I want to talk about the relationship between us and them, which is to say the relationship between us and us, American and Israeli Jews. Because as one speaker at our conference suggested, that relationship is complicated in part because Israelis have not always thought much of diasporic Jewish communities. Part of what informed Zionism from its early stages is a concept called Shlilat Hagolah, the negation of the diaspora. Raise your hand if you've heard of this concept, if you're familiar with this. Okay? As Shaul Magi details in his recent book, The Necessity of Exile, the early 20th century saw great debates between Jews about global Jewish collectivity. Zionists and diasporists, he writes, both rejected, in some fashion, the notion that exile remained an operative category of Jewish existence. The Zionists mostly believed exile had ended, and thus immigration to the land of Israel was necessary. Diasporists also believed exile had ended, and now Jews in the diaspora could live in a safe state of dispersion. Plenty of Zionists too, by the way, like rabbinic luminaries Solomon Schechter or Abba Hillel Silver or Stephen Wise, believed that a fulfilling life could be made outside of Israel. But for decades, there was a nagging sense among many Israelis and Americans alike that being there was inherently better than being here. And this cognitive imbalance, which could also feel like a power imbalance, has only exacerbated, I think, the powerlessness many American Jews feel when they don't see their values reflected in the behavior of some Israelis and Israeli politicians. By the way, I think the reverse is also true. We're not going to solve this problem today, of course, and I don't have a simple prescription to offer, but I do think that the best way to ensure healthy, mutually reinforcing connection between these two great global Jewish centers is to talk about one another as partners, as mishpacha, family, and certainly not chas v'shalom as adversaries. And what I want to suggest is that partnership begins not with union, but actually separation. I can only interface with my interlocutor once I'm clear that I am not her and she is not me. The notion of separation and unity pervades our creation narrative, actually. One of our presenters in Miami this week brought a beautiful teaching from Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, the 19th century Hasidic master. He writes, "The world was created mainly by means of vacated space. God contracted light to the sides, bends the light, and the vacated space was made. Within it, God made all of creation by means of the spoken word. In other words, even before God separates the upper from the lower waters on the second day, the primordial light, which God spoke into existence from within God's own being, was prismed apart, creating space for us, for the material universe and humanity within it. And God does this, it seems, because the Holy One wanted a partner. The Torah sees humanity as the apex of the creative enterprise. God help us. Of course, we may not think of ourselves as equal partners with God, and perhaps we shouldn't. But then again, there are all kinds of sources in our tradition that aspire to a more egalitarian connection between us and the divine. The prophet Hosea, for example, writes, "In that day declares God, you will call me Ishi, my partner. No more will you call me Ba'ali, my master." In fact, the metaphor of human-divine coupling is potent throughout our tradition. Human beings' relationship with one another representing the breach, the covenantal connection between God and Israel. One striking example comes from Dirshuni, a new collection of Israeli women's midrash edited by Tamar Biala that I've been learning with a homebound congregant this past year. On this weekend, celebrating International Women's Day, let's spend a few minutes unpacking this extraordinary egalitarian midrash and see if it might point us toward a richer and more fulfilling partnership between the us of American Jewry and the us of Israeli Jewry. But first, though, we need to know about a fascinating linguistic move that unites our Parsha with the creation of the first two human beings. So we know the story about Chava, Eve, who was created from Adam's rib. But you may not know that the word Sela, which means rib, can be translated differently. And that alternate rendering speaks volumes about how women and men are meant to relate to one another. Exodus 26:26 in our Parsha refers to Karshei Sela HaMishkan, the boards of the side of the Mishkan. The tabernacle, as we heard described today, has a rectangular shape, and one side of that rectangle is called a tsela, the same word that with regard to Adam and Chava we translate as rib. So Rashi, borrowing from the ancient midrash, not a modern but an ancient midrash, suggests that Chava wasn't created from Adam at all, but that Ha-Adam, the first human being, was in fact what we might call today intersex. God's surgery, as it were, on Adam was actually the separation of the male from the female, the union of the two, emerging then from the opportunity provided by the separation. This is why, according to Rashi, chapter 1 of Genesis describes both male and female as created simultaneously, b'tselem Elohim, in God's image. These are not two creation narratives, according to Rashi. They are two versions of the same story. Okay, so now we can look at the modern midrash by Tamar Biala. You should have it on the sheet that I copied for us. And he stationed east of the Garden of Eden the Kruvim, the cherubs, and the fiery, ever-turning sword. And then it says, Tamar said, for I am nearly limping on my side, and my pain is with me always. So this is a particular midrashic form called a petichta. Petichta is a form of homiletical midrash that starts with the ending. So we have two verses that are brought by Tamar, who now positions herself as the darshanit, right, as the midrashic commentator. And the first one comes from Bereshit, from Genesis. And when does that come from? This moment of God stationing east of Eden these Kruvim and the fiery, ever-turning sword. This is right after the expulsion from the garden. So Adam and Chava have eaten from the tree. They weren't supposed to eat from the tree. They're kicked out of the garden. They're east of Eden, if you're into Steinbeck. And then what happens? God sort of sets up a gauntlet to guard the gates of Eden so that humanity may not re-enter paradise. That's the first verse. The second verse comes from Psalm 38, and we'll see how that becomes relevant later. The Holy Blessing One planted Adam in the Garden of Eden and said, let the one created in my image come and do all that I did. Work it, as is said of me. And God saw all that he had made. Guard it, as is said of me. God protects the simple. Let him not eat of the tree of knowledge, so that he not die, as is said of me. The Lord God truly is a living God. So God is in this very deep, intimate partnership with Adam, Ha-Adam, and God says, therefore, I'm going to sort of set up humanity to be very much like me, even to be immortal. And that's why they're not allowed to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because if you eat from the tree of knowledge, you become you have an understanding of what it is to live and what it is to die, what it is to do good and what it is to do wrong. And God's afraid that that's going to change somehow Adam and turn him into something less than God. At the moment, but you'll see paradoxically, actually the opposite happens. At the moment, the Holy Blessed One said to him, do not eat of it, that Adam not feel, so that he would not die. His existential awareness will remain in check. What actually happens, though, is Adam falls silent, and his soul fell silent too. He finds himself actually wondering why God gets to do this thing, or understand this thing, or create this thing, which Adam cannot. And so recognizing that Adam is now somehow different and kind of separated from God in a different sort of way, what happens now? Hi, Nessia. What happens now is that God has to sort of solve for Adam's loneliness. Okay? And so the Holy One said, Lo tov hayot adam levado. It is not good for Adam to be alone. I will make a helping match for him. And God fashioned from the ground all the beasts of the field and all the birds of the sky, and said, let the one created in my image come and do all that I did, and give them names, as it is said of me. And he declared their name Adam on the day that they were created. This is all straight from the Torah. Adam declared names, did not find a helping match for himself, and he spiraled downward, now is the addition in the Midrash, and downward into a silence until he found himself in a great crater alone. The profound partnership between God and the first human being, there's now an increasing separation, not yet a rupture, but a separation as Adam descends into a great depression for having been distinguished somehow between him and the divine. And so loving this new human being, the Holy One could not bear to witness his own suffering reflected back to him, right? Notice the sort of bi-directional language here. God loves this human being. This human being loves God, and yet God, in trying to make the human being like God, fails substantially. And so the Holy One brought sleep down upon Adam. Once Adam's limbs relaxed, the Holy One took, and this is fascinating, an ever-turning sword and cut him along his side. He brought the female side to the male side and stood from afar to see what would become of them. And God was left alone. And the male side turned to the female side and said in relief, in wonder, "This one is it, bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This one will be called woman." And they became one flesh. And he, that is God, wailed and beat his heart. And here comes our pasuk, our verse from the beginning of the Petichta, "For I am nearly limping on my side, and my pain is with me always." Who's the one now emotionally in pain? It's actually God, who feels severed from the human being that he's created. "How can I alone," God says, "and by myself meet my other side? Let the one created in my image come and do all that I did." And so the tables are turned. "Draw the sword and slice me in half and bring the other side to me." And the Lord God called out to Adam and said, "Ayeka, where are you?" Where does that verb come from? Or that question come from? After the sin, and they're hiding in the garden. God says, "Ayeka, where are you?" So now the Midrashist takes that line, Ayeka, out of that context, places it in the ever-turning sword, still at the gates of Eden, but instead God is calling out, "Where are you?" to God's partner. Because now humanity is outside of paradise and God is left alone in Gan Eden. And he stationed east of the Garden of Eden the Kruvim and the fiery, ever-turning sword. And he waited. Wow. Right? So what's remarkable about this story, I think, is that the separation of Adam and Chava from each other creates a cleaving of Ha'adam, the primordial human being, from God. And from that grows a profound loneliness in God, which yearns for a connection to us. God needs us, it seems, as much as we need the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Maybe that's why the word cleave in English can mean both to split and to adjoin, because the latter is made possible, even necessary, by the former. So what about Israelis and us then? I'm not suggesting, of course, that Israel, the land, the state, or the people of Israel has any greater divinity than the diasporic Jewish community. But I'm also not comfortable fetishizing diasporic powerlessness or dispersion any more than fetishizing Israel, Jewish power, or the ingathering of the exiles. What I'd like to see, what I believe many have been methodically trying to build since 1948 and before, is a healthy, collaborative, and mutually reinforcing partnership. The ever-turning sword can be a symbol of violence and exclusion, or it can be a tool of robust association, fulfillment of a deep yearning for connection, cleaving born of cleaving. As we well know, the ever-turning sword is being wielded by Hamas right now, as it insists on discharging this war against Israel, holding hostages, endangering their own citizens and civilians. The ever-turning sword of the IDF is spinning right now as Israel responds to Hamas's attack and discharges a war which I believe to be at its core a just war, but which has brought about horrific consequences and immense suffering of innocent human beings. At some point, God willing soon, The ever-turning swords of Hamas and the ever-turning sword of the IDF will stop spinning. And the question we should ask ourselves now, and we must ask ourselves then, is how will we maintain, how will we restore the partnership, the relationship between the us and the us of American Jewry and Israeli Jewry? And what I want to suggest to you is we do that, we begin that in the way that everything begins, and that's with words. So I'll conclude with this. Rabbi Nachman's teaching about the space within divine light, where we humans have made our homes, includes a beautiful passage from the Zohar, the primary text of Kabbalah. And surprise, it's about Israel, and it's about peoplehood. Contemplating the ways humans use words to create and to destroy, Rabbi Nachman says of rabbis, Torah scholars create everything by way of their words, as it is written in Isaiah, Ve'lemor l'Tzion ami ata. I have declared to Zion, you are my people. And then the Zohar does a midrashic move. It says, don't read this as ami, my people, but imi, with me. You can point these words one way or the other. Just as I, God, make heaven and earth through my word, so you do the same. God creates humanity with the capacity to speak, and in that sense, we are Tzelem Elohim, and in that sense, we are fully similar to the divine. The Shabbat after October 7th, I said the price of belonging is solidarity. I also think the opposite is true. To strive to be in relationship is to open ourselves to the possibilities of belonging. The Am becomes the Im. I'm with her. We're with each other. It's been said that love is a verb. In some ways, family is too. This is a really difficult time to find the right words, but I believe the words that we must find are ones that reflect healing and connection and support and, yes, love. And at a time when the Jewish people are increasingly isolated from the rest of the world, we must remember our deep reliance on one another. Family is family, as they say. Families disagree and they struggle, and sometimes, yes, they fight. But these things should not define us. Families that bicker are different than enemies who happen to be related. In this year of Am, let's remember that in a relationship of mutual affection and esteem, Ani l'dodi v'dodi li, I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. I am yours, and you also belong to me. We are beloved to one another. And more, we cannot be in a true covenant with God if we don't first apply the brit to our fellow Jews across the globe. We are an Am. We're a people. That is who we've always been, across deserts and mountains and oceans, even when we've forgotten that it's so. Shabbat Shalom.